Hello, Crittermanders, Starfinders, and podcast fans, and welcome to Cosmic Crit. My name is Patrick, and I am your Game Master, your podcaster, and your Weebelows level Scoutmaster, taking you all down the trails on another episode of our show. We're back with another special episode this week, episode x06, but this one is going to be a little different from our others. We're not playing Starfinder this week, but we have something that I've been meaning to do for some time, which is talk about the campaign so far, with all 5 of the players and myself. Do a recap of the story and what has happened, and we solicited questions from our Starfinder Discord channel, and we're going to try and answer them tonight as well. It's important to take a look back at the past 37 episodes and reflect, and next week we'll be back with the start of Book 4, Ruined Clouds, and you will not want to miss that. So that's later on in this episode, but first, we are lucky enough on this special episode to have a very special guest interview. We stole some time the week before PaizoCon to chat with Starfinder Managing Developer Amanda Hamon Kunz. Amanda is the author of Book 3, Splintered Worlds, and as we always love to do, we're having a post-mortem right after finishing the book, and we're talking with the writer about their work and what it was like making this up. So I just want to thank Amanda again for taking the time to chat with us during one of the busiest times of the year for Paizo folks, and say thank you very much. So that is this episode. Make sure not to listen if you are not caught up with the podcast, as there are spoilers that will abound here. But also, don't skip this one if you are a true fan of the show. We get into the player character's creation, my game mastering styles, and a lot of other facts about the mysterious backstories on our game. So, without further ado, let's get to the interview. This is special episode x06 entitled Cowboy Recap.
Episode commencing in 3, 2, 1. Episode initiated.
Welcome, everyone. This is your GM, Patrick, and I am joined here tonight by Drew. Say hello, Drew.
Hello, Drew.
And Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
And welcome to this week's very special episode of Cosmic Crit. As is tradition, now that we are fully done with Book 3 of the Dead Sun's Adventure Path, we're going to take a look back at the story, the fights, the action, try and break everything down, break it all down. So joining us on this very special episode is certainly the most appropriate guest we could have interviewed for this endeavor. She is now the managing developer for Starfinder at Paizo and is the author of Book 3, Splintered Worlds, Amanda Hamon Kunz. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you for taking the time. We had some time to do our background checks on you and find out all of your secret history working at Paizo before we got on here tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about your history with the company before we jump into things?
Sure. So I started out my career with Paizo, and in some respects, my career in the freelance industry as a freelance author for Paizo. I started after I met Wes Schneider at Gen Con in 2011. I worked with him to sort of develop some brainstorms of creatures for the Skull and Shackles Adventure Path, if you guys remember back to that.
Oh, yeah. It is one of my favorites. One of my favorite APs, I think, in all of Pathfinder.
Yeah, it was really fun, very thematic, piratey adventure. And pirates are still, of course, very popular in pop culture. But back then, I feel like it was kind of at the height. And so we're cresting into that. And I had a lot of cool, exciting ideas for monsters. And Wes was kind enough to listen to me and see some potential in some of my ideas, and so brought me on board writing monsters for that adventure path. And I continued to do a pretty wide variety of assignments for Paizo and for other third-party publishers during that time period. I think my first things were technically published in 2012, but I worked a lot with Kobold Press and more assignments for Paizo as well. I applied for assistant developer position that was posted and ended up being hired on board here in Seattle, or right outside Seattle in Redmond, for that position in 2015. And since then, I've gone from assistant developer to development coordinator to now managing developer at Paizo.
Whoa.
And yeah, I was on the original design team for the Starfinder core rulebook, and so
in
things have
less than
crested.
7 years, yes. So freelance to assistant developer, and I missed the middle one there. But
And coordinator, yep.
Right. And you're now currently the Starfinding Managing Developer. What exactly are you doing right now? You can't say, I imagine, all the things that you're working on for the future of Starfinder, but yeah, what's the day-to-day like as opposed to just being a Starfinder developer?
So as a managing developer for Starfinder, I manage the schedule of the development work that the rest of the development team works on. And those fine folks are, as you probably know, Owen Casey Stevens is our rules lead. Joe Pacini is a Starfinder developer. Jason Keeley is our Adventure Path developer. And Chris Sims is working on Back Matter for the Adventure Path, and those two will flip-flop roles moving forward, as is customary for Adventure Path developers. And I'm also working very closely with Rob McCreary, who is the creative director for Starfinder. So I work in a management capacity to direct those folks in the work duties and the logistics of how the books get made. And I am also doing development work on the ground, as well as like structural outlining and creative work and creative vision works.
So a lot of big picture stuff, as well as the scheduling of everything. You've got your hands in sounds like just about everything as far as Starfinder goes.
Yes, that's an accurate assessment.
And we unfortunately can't even touch upon it, because that would be we're going to have you back for an entire other interview about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which you're also a lead developer on. How do you have the time for this?
Carved out once we figured out what the schedule for that 2nd edition design and development period was going to look like. Eric Mona, our publisher, was clear that he really wanted Adam Daigle and myself to be the two lead developers, as folks with deep knowledge of the Pathfinder system, and also some rules design and core design experience, in various vectors. Of course, Starfinder for myself. Adam, has been an Adventure Path developer for a long time on Pathfinder, and we were both managing developers, or at least we both would become managing developers during that time period. So there was a period of a couple of months in which he and I worked as a team, passing things back and forth. This was before I was technically promoted to managing developer for Starfinder, so I was not fully full-time on the Starfinder team. And like that there was sort of a master plan in place for, once that ended, moving me back over to Starfinder as managing developer, and that's what ended up happening.
I mean, it's so hard to believe because they're such huge projects. I can't even wrap my head around, switching
Definitely
back and forth. Yeah, exactly. Well, do you mind, though, if we focus on Starfinder and in particular Splintered Worlds for a bit?
Yes, for sure.
For sure. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about Splintered Worlds. I'm the GM for our podcast here, and both Drew and Rebecca are a couple of the players. We've just finished it. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions about the writing process, some of the characters. One thing that you've got in your Paizo biography on Paizo.com is that your writing and GMing and design philosophy is the weirder the better.
Yeah.
Do you think you lived up to that with book 3?
I think the answer to that is probably yes. I was one of the reasons I was so excited to work on Starfinder, and specifically to write an adventure for Starfinder, is that there are just so many options for storytelling in a science fantasy world that just really aren't accessible in Pathfinder, in a traditional fantasy world. And so I was really excited to specifically go to EOX and be able to sketch out a little bit about daily life and the different types types of characters that exist in Orphis, and specifically in sort of the downtrodden district that you end up spending the most time in Splintered Worlds, and what sort of disillusionment happens when you have these undead creatures that are essentially immortal and maybe have discovered that immortality is not everything that has been promised to them, and that they have made plans, to have this glorious eternal life that in some ways is not what they bargained for, or was they were sort of sold a bill of goods and taken advantage of in some cases. And so I was answering a lot of questions that I found interesting about those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
That makes the
but yeah, a lot of those characters are weird.
Yeah. What is the character that you meet in the lobby of the of the Ministry of Eternal Vigilance, which is a fantastic name, by the way. The Eoxian names for things are
Shan Golding.
Orwellian? Yeah, Shan Golding, yeah.
Because if I remember correctly, and you'll have to forgive me, we're not allowed to read the APs because
why would you be?
Spoilers and things like that. So forgive me if I get some details incorrect. But he was a human that was waiting to be made into an undead Eoxian thing, and that's just a whole other interesting facet of Eox that I hadn't even thought about, that he's living this mundane kind of life, waiting to be made an undead immortal being to then go back and live in an apartment in a place.
Yeah. So I sort of was thinking a lot philosophically about the different ways that immortality might be achievable by not necessarily very wealthy characters, but by characters who are sort of scrappy and looking to make whatever deal they can. And one of the answers to that questions ended up becoming Shan, which was a character who has traded kind of indentured servitude for the promise of eventual eternal life, and kind of the ramifications of what that decision actually means once you get into the nitty-gritty of doing that. And so he is one side of that coin, and Juanita Trucks, the ghoul bureaucrat that you meet, and who is sort of your main point of contact, is the other side of that. Somebody who's kind of, quickly done it, and it might not be everything that it's that she hoped it was.
I like dipping in on characters at different points, in that I got the impression that my favorite NPC, the gentle sage Jonesworth, was a long time dead character and just, enjoying basically retirement for centuries.
Yep, and it is has a good time sort of looking down upon what he considers, the lesser living beings that might filter their way through that district there.
Well, how weird would it be if you were like 400 years old and there are all these people just dying around you and they don't have to anymore? You're just like, oh, what is wrong with these living folk? I got into his mind.
Yeah, he is definitely sort of a jerk, but also I think just unintentionally to himself kind of just funny from an outside perspective because of just the way he dresses, and he's got that vestigial head with the top hat, and is meant to be sort of darkly comical, which is kind of a theme throughout that whole section and the portrayal of the splice there in Orphis.
Well, at first I was very angry that he did not get art in the book, but now I'm happy because I think people's mental image of what he would look like is just much more imaginative than any one single graphic could convey. The top hat, and I said that there was a top hat on the little vestigial head as well. So
there were definitely a few characters in that book where it's like, I'm gonna really go gonzo with this. I'm really going to go for like a weird undead sort of version of Total Recall, so to speak. That was kind of what was inspiring some of those things. And I figured, Rob, who was working on these adventures, he's never gonna let a lot of this stuff go through. He's gonna tone some of this stuff back, and luckily he didn't. So I was really glad to see some of the really weird stuff still make it through development.
It reminds me a little of Halloween Town from Nightmare Before Christmas. Just everybody's kind of oh, that guy's a vampire, that guy's a creepy headless thing, and but they're all just going about their daily lives. This guy's a tailor, this guy works in a factory.
Well, and I think it's interesting to take a look at the undead experience, if you will, because even though, none of them have empathy, even though we're looking at it from a different perspective, they're still undead, and they're still sort of monsters on some level. And so it's an interesting sort of dichotomy.
Yeah, that's true. Most of them are, pretty much all of them, the named NPCs anyway, are not nice people, but they're complicated people, and they really ask a lot of questions that the Starfinder system allows, and that, not all undead are naturally, intrinsically evil. Some of them are complicated, and their path to undeath is complicated, and so it's just a lot more interesting to sort of ask those questions and explore that stuff in the adventure.
And actually, that's pretty relatable. Even as humans, we're not inherently good or inherently evil. There's a little bit of that in every character if they're well thought out. So
I'm inherently chaotic neutral. So we talked a little bit about some of our favorite NPCs, and this book is definitely full of them. Let's talk about monsters real quick. You guys got in some pretty big scraps in this book. I'm interested to hear your favorite monsters, and Amanda, yours as well. Do you want to start? Do you have a favorite baddie in this book?
So, in a lot of ways, this book allowed me to draw inspiration from some of the stuff that I'm just personally really passionate about on kind of a nerdy basis. And so I mentioned, Total Recall being one of the influences to just the aesthetic of the Splice and of Orphis, but also the Dead Space video game series. If you guys are familiar with those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're super. I love that series. I really love horror in general, and I love space horror simply because there are so many genre possibilities, and it's not quite such a permeating element of pop culture the way a lot of other horror genres are. But the first part of the book with the abandoned cultist space is certainly inspired by Dead Space and the Ishimura, and just the horror element of not knowing what is around the next corner. Also, the Marrow Blight monster is pretty directly inspired by some of the necrographed or necromorph, excuse me.
Now that you say it, it's hard not to see it.
Yeah, I was writing suggestions for the art order for that, and gave a description of what it ended up looking like, and said, please make sure that this is not a direct analog because it's not the same creature. It's just inspired by this creature.
Exactly.
See, I'm what you would call a chicken. So I have not played the Dead Space games, and now I'm not sure that I want to.
Yeah, they're super scary, especially the first one. The first one, the second one are my favorites.
So I haven't played them either, but I can say that I think you were successful with that first area where you go, the rock or whatever. It was very disconcerting. We were all aimlessly walking around and looking around every corner, what was going to come and shoot us.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Screesire in the AP. Just the idea of a giant tentacled mind control thing that you may not ever see coming. And we were told it could blend into the background, and we started looking at the map and saying, this map looks kind of like a claw in this part. No, it's not that. It's not that. We had a whole big argument about that we cut out of the episode. And
turns out that it's hiding in the acid pool.
Yes, which Patrick is as a GM a big fan of acid pools, because I believe there are a couple of them that make it into this AP.
Me too.
They're in the story, but now there's going to be an acid pool every other episode of the show. So I've got the rules for him, so they got to use them.
He did manage to dunk one of us into the acid pool, but luckily it was the one of us who could survive it the best. So joke's on you, GM. We got you.
So definitely my favorite moment from this book was that in that Screesire fight, when I knew for a fact whoever is getting closest to that pool is. I'm going after them. I'm telling them, it's if I succeed in this reposition attack move, you're going in the pool. And I rolled the dice and it came up a 1, and all the players were like, yay. And then on the next turn, another player ran up to the pool and I did the exact same thing and rolled a natural 20, and it's the most cathartic experience I think I've had in gaming in some time.
It was a really exciting fight.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear. Yeah, I've run that encounter, like an abbreviated version of that encounter a few times at conventions, and I always try to pull somebody into that pool just because it's fun.
How are you not going to? Yeah. Awesome. Well, I mean, at this point, it's been out for a few months, and I'm sure you've heard from people like us that have played it and are really excited, just finishing it. Do you get a lot of that feedback? Do you listen to players out there that say, "Oh, I just got done with it"? What do you get back from them? Do they give you suggestions? Do they tell you like their favorite part of the book?
Definitely kind of a mix. In person, it was usually people who are excited to talk about their favorite part or the most exciting part, or questions about a couple of the specific NPCs. People like to ask whether their vision of the way a character talks is what I thought would be a good idea, or if it's a character in a movie that they're reminded of by the character, wanting to know whether that was an inspiration or whether that's something that I think makes sense. So those are really fun conversations.
They want to find your Easter eggs that you laid out.
Yeah. And, there are a lot of, pretty large, influences. Certainly, it is, of course, all unique and everything, but there are certainly influences behind it. So I have a good time talking about a lot of that stuff.
Well, before we let you go here tonight, can I ask, did you have voices in mind for your NPCs in book 3? And did you have one specifically in mind for Juanita Trucks?
I have a specific character in mind for Juanita Trucks, other than the fact that I really wanted her, or felt like that she would probably sound like an elderly person with a very thick smoker's voice.
Yes.
So I kind of, I sort of always envisioned her being like, a bunch of garbage as she's complaining about stuff that the PCs are doing, or, just being stuck with this bureaucrat a lot in her life. Somebody on one of the boards asked me, or just in general asked, whether Roz from Monsters Inc. would be a good voice for her.
Oh, yeah.
So that is how Patrick modeled his voice for Juanita Trucks, and that is how we know at least two other GMs modeled their voice.
That's where I started, and I definitely tried not to do a 1-to-1 impression, but it definitely keeps sneaking back. It's hard not to.
And I don't want any paperwork on this.
Exactly, and it's hilarious because I totally was not thinking about that when I wrote her, but then the minute that somebody on the boards mentioned that, it's like, oh, you know what, that makes so much sense. That's a great idea.
Oh boy. Well, we're excited to have completed it. We're halfway through with the Dead Sons, and we're really thankful that you're able to come on the show and talk to us. Like, as soon as we got done, we emailed you and we're like, oh, we want to talk about it now. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. And we will touch base again soon, I'm sure, as we get more announcements of things coming in Starfinder's future. Tell us when you can reveal all the secrets about year 2 and 3 of Starfinder's release schedule.
I've definitely stopped recording, so we can totally just talk about anything, and you can trust us. We won't reveal any information. Definitely.
Oh, I bet.
Oh, I always forget to ask this question. Where's Galarion?
Say that.
Where'd you put it?
Anybody has actually said that. That is probably one of the biggest mysteries of the setting. In the same way that what happened to Eridan is the cornerstone mystery of the Pathfinder campaign setting. What happened to Galarion is our version of that.
Oh, we know, but we know that you know, and we want to know what you know. Well, let's wrap this up. Thank you so much, Drew and Rebecca. Thanks for jumping on here with me, and thank you, Amanda, for being here.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was lovely to talk to you guys, and I appreciate you inviting me, and I'd be happy to come back and actually do like the full time that you had planned.
Alrighty. Well, until then,
how's your Tuesday?
Until then, thanks, and thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be right back.
Crit bit commencing in 3, 2, 1. Crit bit initiated.
Hey everyone, we are back with an all new Crit bit, one that we have wanted to do for a long time, and we thought at the halfway point in our campaign that this would be the perfect time to do it. This is Patrick, your GM on this here old podcast, and I am joined by all 5 members of the cast, your players, and my friends, the Cosmic Crit Stars. To my left, we've got a Gundam Nut and a Punishment Glut, Drew, who plays Nak Feldspar, nay Sizrak on the show.
Hey, everybody.
To his left, a brainy chemist with a penchant for killing some karaoke, Jabert, who plays Andis 147.
Greetings, Patrick.
Greetings. Across the digital table from me, we've got a horror fan that thinks he's Batman's ward. It's Miles, and he plays Raimi.
Good evening.
To his left, the breakout star of the podcast, Buffy enthusiast, and happy belated Mother's Day, Rebecca, who plays Alindra Vallis.
Thank you. Hello.
And finally, to my right, brew buddy, gamer, and our West Coast enthusiast, we have Tyler, who plays Edros.
As always, wonderful to be here.
Hey, yeah, and we're not playing, but we're all hanging out together for the first time and maybe forever. How are you guys doing tonight?
This will be Alindra's least favorite episode. Or
I was about to say, like, when are we playing Starfinder?
Yeah. I'm not logged into Roll20 right now, and there will be no surprise rolls. Or will there? No, there's not going to be any surprise rolls. It's like everyone make a fortitude save. What? So yeah, we're gonna
save to stay awake.
That's right. I've poisoned all of your drinks. Glug glug.
No.
We are taking a breather this week, and besides that, I'm going to get a chance to talk with the amazingly talented and delightful Amanda Hamon Kunz. But we thought, since like I said, we're at the exact halfway point through the Dead Sons adventure path, that we would take an episode to reflect on the podcasts as a whole, the story so far. And yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. Story so far, answer some questions from the Crittermanders, our fan Discord channel. And yeah, then just generally talk about the podcast and at the halfway point of episode 37. So first, let's talk about where we are in the story so far. And I figured we could do that with a little wrap up, like a cool retelling of what has happened in our campaign so far. So let's get some music in here going and go through Incident at Absalom Station first. So we started off and you all arrived at Absalom Station, assembled in the HUD bar, and took a job from the Starfinders.
We had our first real episode where we met the Downside Kings and the Level 21 crew and the Hard Scrabble Collective and the Dockside Kings and the Level 21 Scramblers and the Hard Scrabble Connection and other names we continue to get wrong to this day.
After said meeting, where all parties ended up dead, we decided to go and talk to the Starfinders about our findings, and we were attacked by a trio of philosopher goblins.
So we finally made it to the Starfinder headquarters, where we met our good friend Chexmix.
We went to meet with Jabaxa, the Isoki leader of the Level 21 crew, to try to figure out what their beef with the Downside Kings was.
Then the crew headed down to the Fusion Queen. There was some dancing and awkward conversation with a coat check girl.
Stealing into the back room, they fought some gang members and took on Fernane Nadaz, the leader of the Downside Kings.
After the battle, we officially became Starfinders. And I think Andis and Raimi stole that bar.
We did. And then we went to meet our new best friend, Geverlars Knorr, who turned out to be a really great guy and didn't even once leave us trapped on a rock.
Sorry. We then visited the Astral Extractions headquarters, where Andis found a disturbing image coming up from his past. Then we boarded our own spaceship and did our first space combat, which went swimmingly.
We boarded the Acreon, and Adros got bitten by an Akata. We also found a haunting captain's log.
Surprise! The group finds more Akata, but this time, Andis falls prey to their bite.
Taking a rest from their wounds, the crew tried to recover from the Akata's deadly, diseased bite and made a few new friends in the form of 2 goblins.
We took our first steps onto the Drift Rock and met a foe that we turned into a friend. And also featured one of our best crit bits about Andis' backstory.
The crew with Clara 247 continues to explore the Drift Rock, defeating the representative from Astral Extractions.
We then entered a mysterious cave in the Drift Block, encountering various monsters.
we fought drift-dead zombies through corridors inside the rock and found an ancient magical computer.
The crew then uncovered the Sunrise Maiden, hopped on it, was attacked by a monster part 2, and sailed away.
Thinking it would be an easy journey back to Absalom, they were attacked by a corpse fleet vessel, but handily defeating it, they made it back to the station, settled up with Chex Mix, and received their payment and their next mission to investigate on Castrovel some mysterious writings that they gleaned from the alien supercomputer on the Drift Rock.
We headed to the University of Cabaret on Castrovel to look for clues, but we met a big dumb brain and had to do him a favor. Stupid brain.
The one professor who could help us in our quest, Dr. Solstarny, turns out had gone missing.
We then followed our lead to Solstarny into the jungles of Eucalam on Castrovel, which we found very inhospitable, fighting extreme heat, terrifying fauna, and even vicious flora.
We were stalked through the jungle by a Kasarik and found Valkawi, and then prevented Adras from killing her.
Then we had to fight a Rincrota, then we fought a Skyfisher, then we had to deal with a sniper, and she went out with a bang.
Continuing on, after finding the massive statue in the jungle, they made their way through a haunted ancient city and up a mountain to where the Temple of the 12 laid, and were attacked by a giant mountain eel.
After Alindra and Adras had a heart-to-heart about battle strategies, she murdered an elf and stole his clothes.
After our laborious trek through the jungle, we finally catch up with our arch nemesis, Tahuman, and we lay waste on him, but not before figuring out some deep, dark secrets about the temple.
Returning to civilization, Andis and Alindra went to a party at the university. While crushed by Rakawi's death, Edros goes to the Church of Sarenrae.
Mercenaries came after Raimi, and we almost died in the streets of Castrovel.
The crew leaves Castrovel and ends up running into one of Adras's old friends, piloting the Rusty Rivet. They reunite and swap information, and then the team heads to K2904 in the Diaspora to continue the search for the Cult of the Devourer.
On K9204, the team finds bodies, a lot of dust, and a massive aberration called a Screesire that gives Adras a little bit of a scale cleaning bath.
On K2409, we entered the cultist base, the Star Eater Spine, and learned what happens when Knack gets dumb. Niara knows. Niara knows. Niara knows.
From K9204, we discover that the Eoxian rebel militia, the Corpse Fleet, has been here already. So off to Eox we go. And on the way are beset by none other than the Corpse Fleet.
As we approach Eox, we are contacted by a game show host named Zoe, who invites us to fight an unknown monster, which turns out to be the Liquid Carbon Golem.
After besting the monster, we got to use a mnemonic editor called a New You, and we also found out the Knack's actually a Feldspar.
The crew heads to the Ministry of Eternal Vigilance to meet up with their information broker, Juanita Trucks, and then follow some clues that lead to a Marrow Blight. But we end up fighting a giant Elikoth first.
And finally, making their way back from the Marrow Blight's hermitage, they were assaulted by none other than Zira Vesh, Raimi's erstwhile evil overlord, and the big bad of Book 3. And that catches us up where we are right now. And
A lot has happened.
37 episodes and in 3 books. Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, a lot of stuff happened. So if you're a fan of the show, you probably are like, wow, they skipped a lot of stuff. That's because we in a couple of minutes tried to encapsulate probably 40 to 60 hours, somewhere in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of gameplay time. What do you guys think going back through all the episodes?
I can't believe we're alive.
Yeah, we've been through some stuff.
Tyler, I dropped you in acid.
You dropped me in acid.
In a vat of acid.
We had to fight these void puppies. And I can't believe how lucky we got. Like, looking back on it, how lucky we were in certain situations, like at the Fusion Queen when you dropped the grenade through the door and just blew up Edros and like somebody else. There's just a lot of times where I thought that we were going to die. And,
level 1 is very dangerous. Level 1, level 2.
Ooh, well, apparently, like level 4 is pretty dangerous too, because like Tahoman was no joke, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that was a hard fight, and I think all the bookend fights have been pretty hard. Although I don't know, book 1 was just hard from like start to finish. It's like every part of that was.
We were not prepared for Akatas at all, and honestly, I feel like we've had some like the Tahoman fight was the first one where we had somebody go down and just had to stabilize with RP, right? And
technically no, but I mean, the first time in like a major fight, we had Tyler go down at Dross's in the mountain eel fight.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But I would still say there were some pretty dangerous situations before that.
That whole thing between the mountain eel fight, the Tahuman fight, and the Kasathan mercenaries on the side of the road fight, which were all in about this block of 4 episodes, were some of the most difficult fights that we have had. The most like dangerous, terrifying. Oh my gosh, somebody's actually going to die in this fight right now.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that Castrovel, the like pretty like very well
it's ironic.
Planet
It's
is the one
that
that
like
is most
Jurassic
dangerous.
Park is the most dangerous.
I mean, I guess it makes sense. I mean, the jungle, yeah, but
most of the
Kavarot is
continents
where we
are
had
pretty.
the mercenaries.
Oh, that is true. That was added in though, of course, by your GM that wanted to.
I didn't find that
spice
dangerous.
things up. Yeah, no, you didn't get hit. Oh, so much fun. Right, 37 episodes. I don't think we have 37 left in the campaign because we added so much stuff in the first half. So many episodes of character development. But we definitely do have 3 more books. And I'm very excited. We're just digging into book 4 as we record this. So I can't wait to see where it goes.
One of the things I've liked about the first 3 is, in the beginning, it's just the progression of us learning about the Stellar Degenerator and then having all these other factions learn about it. And then now we've started the race. So, because like it's just cool in an adventure that, we're not the only ones who know about this super powerful thing and we got to go take care of it. It's going to be a mad dash and it's a big deal and there are a lot of players involved. And it's been cool to see all those players show up and have their own spotlight.
Oh, yeah. Right. So do you guys want to move on and take some questions from our listeners, from our Crittermander fan base?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Right, so we solicited some questions for me, for you guys as players, for all of us together, and we'll just go through them all, and we'll give a quick shout out if we took your question. Let's start, Rebecca.
Sure. So this question comes from Cosmic11 on Discord.
Great name.
And they ask, this one is for the entire crew. What were the inspirations for the characters they made and their backstories?
Well, I was about to say all my characters are in the AP for the most part. So pretty easy.
Yeah, I think Rebecca should start with this one.
All right, so I can start. And I have a little bit more to say about this later, but when I first started thinking about Alendra and what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to make a Solarian, and the first thing I thought was Buffy. So it's kind of funny that was mentioned in my intro today.
It's like I know you guys better than you know yourselves.
Yeah, I think in my original outline of what I wanted my character to be like, I drew upon Buffy as a source of inspiration for a variety of reasons. As someone who is sort of normal or trying to be normal, thrown into this very extraordinary situation with extraordinary powers and dealing with that. I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. So
yeah, I was really inspired by the idea of the renewal with the androids and sort of in the core rulebook. I thought that was a really interesting thing. And as soon as I read that, I sort of knew that I wanted to play an android. And sort of out of that came this idea that I knew that I wanted to explore things related to the androids' past lives. And out of that sort of came when I read about the exocortex feature for the mechanic, that seemed like a really great fit. And so that sort of came together in that sort of way. I'm not gonna be like, I'm Data. but you know, but I think
got a
there,
robot brain.
right? Yeah, I mean there are similarities with many sort of like representations of androids in a lot of science fiction. I think
You're gonna make an android. You're gonna have a little bit of data in there. You can't.
you're gonna get a little bit
a few eggs.
You're gonna be a little Data, a little bit Bishop, but you know, you try to shoot down the middle.
Coolest. Anybody else? Any other inspirations for your characters' backstories?
I was kind of simultaneously inspired by the idea that, like, if you go to any major city, and this is going to be a little gross, I guess, but every major city is full of rats in every wall. There's always hundreds and hundreds of rats everywhere, all over cities. And I liked the idea of that being part of a secret cabal of like intelligence gathering and assassin and thieving rats that all work together. And I also like the idea of being an Ahsoki that wasn't a mechanic or a soldier, because I feel like those are the two things that, when you look at what other folks were doing for Ahsoki, because they're naturally, you know, mechanically minded and the stuff like that, to do kind of what I perceived at the time to be the opposite of what other folks were doing, and making a rat man be like the face of a group, like the one doing all the talking and but with all this other information to back it up.
I think you probably achieved that because, you know, honestly, I haven't seen that many other Ahsoki envoys out there besides the old Knack, Sizrak / Feldspar. Ooh, what about you, Miles?
So with Raimi, it was weird because I wasn't really thinking so much about what I wanted to play, but kind of who I wanted to play. Like I wanted to kind of design my character first before really thinking, because I wasn't familiar with, you know, Pathfinder that much, or Starfinder, even though we played the homebrew game. So I wanted to get myself comfortable in the character first, and I kind of wanted to combine elements. I think when I first like made the sketch of the character, I said I kind of wanted Batman meets cyberpunk Aladdin.
so oddly specific in general. At the same time, I love it.
And so I kind of wanted him to have, you know, the wealthy parents, but I didn't want it to have the you know, the typical you know, his parents were killed.
Tragic backstory.
But maybe he was the focus of his tragic backstory.
That's something I wanted to point out. Is kind of a trope in a lot of RPG character backstories, is to have, like, you know, oh, my wife and kids were killed, now I have to go avenge them. You know, sad backstory. Nobody here really had a super sad one, you know, just kind of like complicated, which I found as a GM was really quite refreshing.
I mean, you could argue elements of his was kind of sad.
Yeah, sad, but not. I'm talking like full-on Oedipal Greek tragedy.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I wanted to avoid the Batman trope, basically. But I wanted him to have an element of fun, that he was a more lithe character, and that's kind of where I started with him.
I wanted to say that was purposeful on my part. I wanted to avoid having dead parents, because in our previous game, my character was only out for revenge for her father's death. It felt really flat to me. So I learned very quickly that it was a lot more interesting if you wove a story that was a little more rich and not just based on these tropes that are sort of hackneyed at this point.
What about you, Tyler?
Dross is based off a single man, Captain Samuel Bellamy, who was a pirate, responsible for taking I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the largest prize in history. And he was known for his the treatment of the ships he captured. He was a honorific man. He was very dedicated to the democratic process of pirate ships, and he was he didn't just take any prizes. He kind of specifically went after like the large cargo, you know, type of shipments, I suppose. And he was often called like the Robin Hood of the sea. So in part, it's also based off of Robin Hood.
Did he convert to a neutral good religion at some point?
No, I don't know if he was a religious man at all, but he was a very honorific man. And I wanted to make a character who did not see the law as something that inherently had to be followed, but was more bound by his own sense of justice. And also had, when I heard that there were space pirates, I couldn't avoid that. So
Yeah, well,
I wanted to jump fully into that as well. But I wanted space pirates to be a part of his background. I didn't want it to be his identifier either. So yeah.
Right.
Well, this kind of segues well into our next question, which was provided to us by Tim. This is for the players. Was there a different character you had in mind before choosing what you currently play as? For me, no. I started working on Adros, and I knew I wanted to play the Vesk right away, and I pretty much had a pretty core concept when we immediately decided to do this podcast. So I really never had anything like that.
Well, we should mention before we get into this that you guys were making your characters and writing up your concepts before the rulebook came out. So, you're basing it on like the descriptions of the iconics and the classes that we got that scant information before the book was published. So, one thing I would like to point out here is at one point, two of you both were fighting over who was going to be the operative.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then nobody picked the operative. And I was like, wait, what?
Was that me and Drew?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking about making, at the time he didn't have a name, but it was the same basic backstory, but operative instead of envoy, to be like basically a master splinter kind of thing, but switched to the envoy once more information about the envoy became available.
Right. So I thought that was hilarious because I was already prepping, I think, in my mind those plot points for an operative, and then we didn't have one.
Same with Raimi. He kind of, as far as he was probably outside of being an operative, like his basic background was always the same. So I think he was still the same character I had in mind when I was making him, because like you said, the emptiness of the character was being done as we were not having the rules yet. So
yeah. Well, did anyone else have any other races or classes they wanted to play?
I mean, I can say that I definitely knew Lashunta and Solarian from the get-go. And I even asked Patrick, like, is there any chance that I can play the Solarian? Because I was so sure somebody else was going to choose it before I could.
Yeah.
So I was very pleased that nobody else had.
Rebecca, haven't you heard Solarians are underpowered? They totally suck.
I know. They're so lame.
They're terrible.
Garbage tier class, not even worth playing. So we definitely won't have any in our future season.
Yeah, we would
toss that class out.
We'd probably be done with the AP if we didn't have one in our party.
I know, I'm holding everybody back.
Season 2 of Cosmic Creator. It's 5 Solarian. Fighting everything. It's like turn 3. It's a bloody mess. Oh no. Oh, all right. Well, let's jump into the next question. Jabber.
From The Masked Ferret. A, which was your favorite NPC and why? And B, what was your favorite monster and why?
Yeah. So if you guys have one or the other that you feel very strongly about, let's talk about them.
Oh, I definitely have an NPC.
Mm-hmm.
The goblins. I love them so much.
Yeah, the goblins are very good.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yes. One of my favorite as well that also fall into that category of you could have just killed them. Like it'd be a very different adventure path.
I tried.
Yeah, on multiple occasions. Let's not forget that.
I'm trying to think of an NPC that I really, outside of the dog.
Yeah.
The Akatas were pretty great.
Yeah, the
Akatas were pretty great.
The Akatas are my favorite monster. They were the first monster that was kind of, because I guess they were our first super deadly monster, and that was something completely different than what we had ever fought before, and
they had a lasting threat.
Yes,
yeah, they were scary. They were scary.
Yeah, I think the Akatas are probably mine too.
Part of the fear I think from them was like, oh, they have these really negative health effects that, could kill you after a couple days, and you're stuck on the ship. Like, it doesn't tell you how to get off the ship. You have to explore the entire ship, really, to kind of figure out where to go.
And if we had a different party, they might not matter as much, but for our particular party, it definitely does.
No, I think, even if you had a mystic in your ranks, it would still be pretty hard going. And I've read a lot of people's playthroughs of this. The Acreon is nearly a TPK in a lot of situations, which is good. I want at least one part of each book to be like a nail-biting, white-knuckle thrill ride. And I think
it's always funny with us because we seem to have trouble with parts that should take us no time and then breeze through parts that shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Because remember on the Drift Rock, there was this boss you had created and we just like killed it in one round, no problem. It was some like robot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that wasn't a boss. It was, I would have thought, a pretty difficult fight, but the ancient robot on the Drift Rock, you guys, I think, took out in 2 turns. It was
nothing.
No,
quick.
I do actually have a favorite NPC, and that is Juanita Trucks. She is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
My kind of woman.
There's a lot. There's a lot of NPCs, and I told Amanda this, that on Eox were amazing, and I wanted to just, I want to take twice as long on those episodes.
We just get an apartment here on Eox, and just like the rest of the podcast happens here.
You buy the bar, but it's on Eox, and like Jonesworth Gentle Sage comes in, and you're like, Jonesworth.
I was really tempted to start like breathing on everything in that store just to piss him off.
No, please stop that. Gross.
No, I want to hang out with Zoe like all the time.
Well, we'll bring him back if you want.
Wait,
Watch the Rock in the Sun.
Yeah, there it is.
For I guess for me, it's pretty, at least for the NPC, it's pretty obvious, Rakalwi. And with the monsters, I still like the Screelings and the Screesire. I still think they're cute. I wish Idros could have kept one.
Yeah, they're pretty good too.
Pretty cool fight. Twist My Arm favorite monster is pretty tough. I mean, as far as a fun fight goes, I didn't have fun during the Akata fights because they're just like, they move up and bite you, I really did like the Screesire fight because I knew that we would have like some different moving parts, and like there'd be a couple of oh gosh moments where you might get dipped in acid. So I was waiting for those and building those up. Anybody else? Right, let's go on to the next question, which is from, speaking of them, the Chupra Akata, one of our fans who took the mythical beast and wed it with an Akata. The question is, did your characters develop the way you originally envisioned them? And what's the most surprising aspect of the characters now that you've kind of grown into the story and into some of your backstories and things like that?
All right, so I mentioned before that Buffy was originally in my outline for the character, but I kind of scaled it back initially and went more Willow, a little more nerdy and
at the beginning,
unsure of herself at the beginning. Yeah. I mean, that was all intentional. I know people don't necessarily realize that, but it was intentional. And I mean, she's still kind of coming into her own, but I feel like she's becoming more and more like Buffy, which wasn't necessarily intentional, but I think has naturally happened. So I'm kind of surprised by how well that has gone, actually, because it was sort of the progression I wanted to make, but not necessarily something I have been thinking about all along the way. It's kind of happened organically. So I've been pleased with that.
Right. This question, I'd be very interested because we've gone through so much of your guys' backstory. Drew and Miles, are there any aspects of your characters now that you've kind of grown into them a little bit over the course of these three books, and we've figured out a little bit of what makes each of them tick?
Yeah, so you might remember from an early episode where Knack was trying to sleight of hand to pickpocket people in the club. That was going to be a huge thing, is that he was going to be constantly trying to retest his skills because he was trying to retrain himself and stuff that he had lost, and that it just didn't come up. The story moved too fast, and that sort of thing happened. And also, he was everywhere the party was going to go. I had these like references to it built in as if Knack had been there before, and they were all based on movies. But like changed enough to where listeners would know this. He's just quoting Empire Strikes Back or A Christmas Story or whatever. And I don't even think I think I mentioned that in like the intro to the character, and it just never happened in the show.
Yeah, no, the idea was Knack maybe had a cousin on like every planet that you went to, and you can that was the long running joke is that he has like a massive family.
Exactly.
In all aspects. Miles, what about you?
So I think the plan for Remy ended up being a lot different than how he ended up being executed. Originally, I had envisioned him as being kind of all of his kind of, as people call him, grumpy. All of that angst was supposed to be more buried deep in him, and he was supposed to be a little bit more devil may care, a little more quippy, and a little more kind of just like mouthy. And I think it's during the first episode, I rolled a certain way, and it kind of just changed the perspective of the moment for me. Mm-hmm. And from then on, like it was like, no, he doesn't want to be there, and he's kind of doing this against his will, so he's just leaning against the back of the bar, like he's not wanting to be. Right. And so I kind of kept going that avenue, but it was a lot different than what I had originally anticipated and even wanted to play him as. But it was really kind of the way it rolled and the way the scene went out, where it started off as like, oh, he's just kind of reluctant, and maybe the reluctant captain to he doesn't want to be here at all. And so that did come out a lot differently for Raimi, and it has been kind of fun to finally get to tell his story as to why he is the way he is, and what happened to him before going to Absalom Station, and kind of seeing the reasons that he's kind of been so reserved. I kind of anticipated that to come out a little bit slower, a little more quickly throughout the story. But yeah, he was definitely a lot more of a friendly character when I first envisioned him.
Huh. Well, that's so interesting. You bring up a pretty valid RP point, is you could make a character and write a backstory where you are the best warrior in the entire land, like you're Conan or whatever, and you win every single fight, and then get to the table and you roll nothing but natural ones, over and over, and then you have to rewrite your backstory to align with the fickleness of fate.
Yeah. Which I've actually enjoyed doing. Like a lot of the stuff that I've done, has been what I thought my character would do, mm-hmm. and not necessarily what Miles would do.
Yeah, no, I think we joked about that at the beginning. Is you're actually probably the nicest person here on the podcast, and you just enjoy everything. We joke about how you love everything, and it's interesting that you went a little darker, a little different for Raimi.
Yeah, it's been fun though.
Anybody else? Did your characters develop over the course of these 37 episodes different? I'm interested to hear from Tyler.
Adros did everything exactly how I thought it was going to go.
Did you foresee the Sarenrae stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean, I thought that was
episode before.
Yeah, no, that was obviously going to happen, Patrick. I think everybody saw through that. No, obviously, yeah. The biggest thing that happened with Adros was the Sarenrae awakening, and I had no idea it was coming.
Me neither.
Yeah, that just kind of. I mean, I wanted Adros to be a caring person, and when Rakawi died, I wanted him to feel that responsibility, and everything just kind of happened naturally from that point. And I thought it all, nothing that happened didn't. I think it all made sense to the character. I mean, he's an emotional, caring guy for people he's close with or friends with, or people that he feels deserves to have life, be better for them. And so it was all just perfect. But I just never would have thought after that episode that I would have to be reading about the Church of Sarenrae and trying to figure out how this character would even react to being a part of this new faith. Luckily, he has an intelligence score of 8, and I got to kind of
just feel your way through.
Feel my way through it.
Religion.
Yeah, thankfully, and it's just been very interesting. But I never would have thought.
Right. Well, can we get into this next question, because there's some stuff I want to say about it and about your character in regards to these characters and their backstories.
Yeah, so this question comes from Phoenix Havoc, and it's a question for Patrick in particular. No wonder he wanted us to focus on this question.
I was getting tired of not talking.
How difficult was working character backstory for this AP? Were there any major plot points that you changed for that purpose?
Right. So, this is kind of a big question, and one of the ones we get asked a lot. I think we got this asked in a few different ways for this crit bit, and it's one that we talk a lot, like me and you guys individually, and you guys as a group, afterwards. I obviously kind of add in a good deal of stuff about your characters' backstories into the AP, whether it's added in some fights or just changing how your characters might be connected to the characters in the adventure path. It was pretty hard, mainly because you guys wrote your backstories before the AP came out, before the adventure path was in my hands. And then it was one of those things where I just had to adapt as I got each new AP and kind of write some new ideas into your backstories. To go back to you, Tyler, with the Dross, I had a completely different backstory idea and arc for your character that got thrown out in book 2 after we pledged you to the Church of Sarenrae for various reasons. One of the things I was just going to write more about was like your pirate background and becoming like one of the best pirates and things like that. Because before we started, I had a brief description that there were pirates in this last book, Splintered Worlds. I was like, oh, maybe there'll be like some chances for him to interact with a whole bunch of pirates, or go to Broken Rock, or so that had to change a lot. Do you guys have any questions before we wrap up, just about the adventure path and what I've written versus what was in the book? Because that comes up a good deal, and it seems like for the most part you can guess which is which, but sometimes you are fooled.
I just want to highlight some of the lucky things that happened that were kind of
the serendipitous
backstory stuff, like Andis 147 meets Clara 247. No idea that character existed when Javert was making his character.
I'm not gonna lie, I did not know that androids had numbers after their name when I made my character's name. Like, this was not a thing that was known.
They don't have to, but just about everyone in the book does.
Right, but they often do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, when I got that and started prepping, I was like, should I change the number after her name? Because it's so very different, right? It's one number off.
But there's an even bigger one that popped up. Rebecca, you take away on this one.
I'm guessing you're talking about the constellation tattoo, right?
Yes.
So I planned very early on. I mean, this was like July of last year before the game came out. I planned for Alindra to have a constellation tattoo that she had named the Gateway, of all things.
Yeah.
And then
what the flip?
I know, right? And then we're going through like the Temple of the 12 and find mosaics of elves like putting
tattooing
constellation
themselves
tattoos.
With constellations. I didn't make that up. That was in the adventure path, and that's why
there were
when we
elven gateways, like it was insane.
We immediately stopped the podcast. We were like, hacks, cheater hacks.
So that was episode 24, and I had to wait 24 episowepisodes after we started the podcast to be like, I can't believe how crazy this coincidence is. I'll be able to talk more about this stuff when we do this episode again at the end of the adventure path, which I'm very excited about because I can spill the beans, as it were, about all these story beats. But there were a few instances of you guys doing that and me just being like, what are the chances,
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to point that out because that constellation thing still gets me to this day that was that
makes me feel like a genius. So
you should, because
it also makes Patrick sound like, oh man, he wove this character backstory in so well.
Yeah. I I was kind of curious, Patrick, what like with the fight with the mercenaries on Castrovel, like if you would have kidnapped Raimi and what you would have done with him at that point.
Oh, right. So, I mean, obviously there would be some kind of chase, some kind of space battle. I thought it might be interesting if, like, to get him back, you all had to meet up with Rusty Rivet, which was like the next thing that happened. And, maybe we would just have like a whole side episode. I knew that I wanted to give each of you guys at least one episode for like your backstories each. So that's what I've tried to do as we've moved on, try to give you all just like a little bit of stage time. And obviously, some of that might be broken up over multiple episodes. So, that was the kind of the introduction of, oh yeah, he's a Quindar. He's actually a very sought after and wealthy individual. And yeah, that was me introducing his backstory. And, I was hoping we could continue it on in book 3, and we got through a good amount of it.
That was cool.
with episode 37. So, any other questions? I did add in, one or two characters from like each of your backstories at some point during these 3 books.
Oh, speaking of Raimi's backstory, it's a little bit on my mind because it just happened. But the Forgotten, is that a Patrick invention or is that in the AP? I'm guessing it's Patrick invention.
Yeah. That was Leanna inside this coffin, and that was technically a Miles invention. Miles wrote that character.
That is a question that I have. So even back on the Acreon, when we have to find the special package, was that always Liana, or is there a package on the Acreon?
Oh no! So that was in the AP. That was Hebzia Escalar, who was a Corpse Fleet member that Ambassador Noor wanted to like get to Absalom Station. Never really explained why. In the brief wrap up and last episode, I just invented a reason because I wanted to have some closure to that story loop. That honestly, every time after book 1 that I got one of the Adventure Path books, I opened it up and did a Control F to find like, Escalar or Corpse Fleet to try and see if they wrapped up the story. Because I was like, oh, why did he want her? So my explanation for it, and I think if you're listening as a GM and you're running this for your players, just make something up. Maybe Ambassador Noor is a part of the Corpse Fleet, or maybe he has like spies in the Corpse Fleet, or my explanation was it's just someone he was related to and wanted to get out of the Corpse Fleet, wanted to turn things around.
Not that I've read any APs before, so excuse the idiotic question probably, but is that just a red herring? Like, does that happen a lot in APs where you have just like paths that lead nowhere like that?
Not necessarily, but that's definitely like a side quest thing, with this NPC that, yes, Ambassador Noor came back in book 3, but it's not the main story, So that's a plot thread that, because the books are written by different authors, they might say, oh, hey, you can take this character and write them and do something with them, but maybe that's not in the book 3 author's mind, or book 4, 5, or 6 author's mind. So
I think sometimes they're just things like that for players to have to decide what they want to do and then have consequences for it. Because some players might say, we don't trust Givalarsk, and open it up. And now they have to deal with it.
Yeah, I honestly debated opening it up, or insisting that we open it up on the Acreon. And
so that opens up a whole different can of worms. Like, if you are belligerent to Hebzia Escalar, she attacks you, and you have to fight a CR3 Bone Trooper, these monsters that you just destroyed in the last episode. You have to fight her at level 1 or 2, which could be kind of difficult. Or you could just talk to her and she's like, I need to get back to Absalom Station, and it's kind of like a murky gray area, like why is there a Corpse Fleet member in this box? So it's just one of those things that adds some flavor. And if you had opened it up, you would have introduced the idea of the Corpse Fleet as being kind of in this AP a little earlier.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I've listened in on some of our friend podcast, Rogue Exposure for example, who've done things a little bit differently. So it's always fun to hear the different paths that the AP can take you down. Like for example, in book 3, the investigation into the corpse fleet on Eox. There's like a ton of different ways you could do that. One of them is like you just hear a rumor about the Marabite and you go straight to the Hermitage and skip everything. So
Like
Lots
without
of different
seeing
ways.
Juanita Trucks first? Like you can just go straight there?
you probably would still want to meet her. But
okay.
One of the things I gave Knack to do is after getting the 2 reports to the Ministry of Eternal Vigilance, I allowed him to do a sense motive on the reports to tell that they were just clearly some kind of red herring or ruse, which they were. But he unfortunately did not make that sense motive.
Yeah,
check.
thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. Even with the expertise. Right. Any other questions about that? Do you guys, before we wrap up the crit bit tonight, do you have any ideas of what lays ahead for Cosmic Crit and for the Adventure Path Dead Suns in books 4, 5, and 6?
I have an idea. I think
Mhm.
we play more Starfinder.
Okay, well, ding ding, we've got a winner.
Yeah.
Well, what do you
Best
expect what do you expect to see in those books, and what do you expect to happen on the show?
So the core rulebook spends a lot of time talking about the sun that Absalom Station orbits, and specifically the like structures and all of that around the sun. Yet we haven't really explored any of that yet. I'm wondering if the sort of ultimate goal, the device that destroys everything, is going to be around that, or if we will spend any time exploring that aspect of it.
Awesome. That's a pretty cool suggestion. Anybody else? Anybody got any crazy conspiracy theories about where we're going?
Is it possible that the sun is part of the 12, like of the 12 suns that make up the weapon?
I like how you're asking a question like I'm going to give you an answer.
No, I'm not. I'm positing to my fellow players
Yeah,
a theory.
Yeah, I have sort of a theory that the ancestors of all of the cast members were somehow involved in the excavation of the super weapon, the solar degenerator, the stellar degenerator. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it translates to.
The
yes.
MacGuffin.
the
MacGuffin.
stellar MacGuffin. The one.
Well, we did find
no qual Falcon.
We did
Yeah,
we did
yeah.
find that picture like episodes ago that had a bunch of people that seemed to be related to our characters.
Right. Yeah, so I think we might have to revisit that soon.
Yeah, I think that it will open.
What? Well,
What, 7-Eleven?
Yeah,
We'll open up.
no.
It's doors.
I hope so.
I think the gate will open. I think that I'm hoping that the evil things manage to get the gate open, and that we actually have to enter into the realm that the stellar degenerator, the super weapon, sits in. That's kind of what I hope. That's what I'm hoping the gateway is that because for the cult, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe for the cult, this is basically a gateway to exercise. What's that evil god's name?
I mean, they worship the Devourer.
The Devourer, yeah. It's a means for the Devourer to, end all existence. And I'm hoping that we get to actually go into some place that is outside of this plane and do something there.
Well, it would certainly be a lot easier. It would certainly be a lot easier if they would go ahead and open up that gate for us, because it's probably a whole half of a book just opening up that gate. So if they'd just go ahead and do it,
do it. Yeah.
I'm just hoping
you want
that
to skip ahead in the AP and be like 2 levels under.
I'm feeling lucky, Patrick. I'm feeling lucky.
I'm just hoping they'll put the controls to the Stellar Devourer in our hands, because I feel like that is an amount of power that would maybe negatively impact the decision making of certain members of our team.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you talking about?
Well, we have a pirate.
Whoa, that sounds
He seems
very
a little-
judgmental.
Seems a little evil. We have a Solarian who was so against murder that she murdered a bunch of teenagers in like the first episode of the show. I'm just saying.
All right. Well, the first thing I'm aiming at with the super weapon is Feldspar Corporation.
No!
Yeah, seriously.
Oh boy. I wish I can confirm or deny some of your theories. I don't even have book 6 yet. It comes out in another month, so I'm gonna have to wait along with you all. But we won't have to wait for long because, like I said, we're starting up book 4 soon, and I can't wait to get to it. And before you know, we'll be on to 5 and 6. Yeah. But before then, let's go ahead and let's wrap this up and let people get back to their work. If you're listening to this on Monday morning when we release, or whenever you're listening, get back to it and jump on into book 4 next week.
Woohoo!
Thank you guys for chatting with me. I'm happy we got to talk about your characters a good deal, about what's happened so far. It's fun just to talk about the game. We do text a good deal about it. We talk maybe individually, but this is one of the first times we all got to sit down and rap about it.
Yeah.
All 6 of us. Alrighty, so that's going to do it. Thank you, everybody, and let's wrap this up and say good night, Crittermanders.
Good night,
Crittermanders.